James, what really stands out for me is how these countries are going to be using this new resolution, these new laws, to clamp down on people. That's going to raise its own problems, isn't it?
Yes, it is. This is going to be restrictions, and exactly how this is going to be enacted, because what the resolution, the new resolution 2178 says, is it wants national governments around the world to institute national laws that says it will be illegal for foreign fighters to travel to Iraq and Syria. But yes, how exactly do you put that into legislation in the 193 states of the United Nations? And although this is a binding resolution, because it is now international law, how will countries actually comply to this? Of course, that's not the only part of it. We also have an extension of the sanctions mechanism that was already in place since 2001, since 9/11, for Al-Qaeda, to include ISIL, and the other buzz phrase you've heard, countering violent extremism, efforts or encouraging efforts at community building, and you heard President Obama there talking about it, persuading people that the path of violence isn't the way to go, persuade them instead that there is a better path, a path of peace. So that was what the resolution was all about, and that was unanimously passed. Interesting contributions to hear from some of the countries of the Security Council, because that's what we heard. The 15 members of the Security Council speak first, and now other countries have been invited. This is very rare that a meeting like this is held at leader level, and most of the 15 did put their leaders, their heads of state and heads of government, in their seats. The only ones that didn't were the Russians and Chinese, who both sent their foreign ministers. Interesting to listen to them, because there was some nervousness, I can tell you, from Western diplomats about exactly what the Russians were going to say. Were they going to condemn the recent attacks on Syrian soil as being illegal and a breach of the UN Charter? They didn't say anything like that. They broadly, I think, welcomed certainly the resolution, although they had their own idea of a new forum with members of the African Union, the Arab League, and the permanent 5 members of the Security Council to deal with Middle East issues, not just ISIL. They said that shouldn't be looked at on its own, but they also should look at other issues, including the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. That, quite an interesting, important proposal from the Russians. What will be interesting to see now is whether this is something that gathers some momentum, because sometimes you hear Russian proposals that come forward and then they get quietly forgotten. So let's see if any other countries think that's a good idea.
Let's talk a little bit about leadership, Barack Obama's leadership here. I mean, he's had a busy day. He was at the United Nations General Assembly meeting a little earlier on. He's just left now to attend another meeting. How is he coming out of all of this?
Well, he's certainly had a very good opportunity here, because this is the September gathering of world leaders, and the way it works is the alphabet, and that is how the 15 members of the Security Council decide who gets each month in the presidency of the UN Security Council. So it just happened that September was the date that the US, after the UK before it, was chairing the Security Council, presiding over the Security Council, and cleverly they seized on that and decided, well, if we're going to have all the world leaders in New York, and if we are the president of the Security Council, then we're going to make the most of it, and we're going to chair this meeting, this Security Council meeting, and instead of ambassadors, we're going to put world leaders in. So there's some quite important symbolism there, and what they've been trying to do is get the ball rolling ever since the NATO summit, getting more and more people joining their coalition. Their coalition is now pretty large. There's 101 countries that have said they support this UN Security Council resolution. Only 15 needed for the vote, but 101 countries in total supporting this resolution. Only problem with that, Jane, is that yes, there are many members now of this coalition, but there's the coalition and there's what I would call the inner coalition, the ones that are actually doing the heavy lifting, involved in the military action. And even among that inner coalition, there's some like France who are bombing in Iraq, but not in Syria. Another interesting place to watch in the coming days will be the UK, because we hear David Cameron now is going to call a special session of the House of Commons, and it looks like he's going to put more UK involvement to the vote in the UK, and I think that'll be important. Remember, it was just over a year ago that last time they were talking about military action in Syria, and it never went ahead in the end. One of the reasons it didn't go ahead was that the UK Parliament was the first body to say, no, we're not taking part. So I think Cameron must be quite convinced he's got the numbers on his side to decide to take it to Parliament and take it to a vote.
I'm sure. James, thank you for that. Let's leave it for the minute.